Welcome to part 3 in our discussion of key factor method operators in RxJava's Observable class. As you may recall from part 1 and part 2, factor method operators create observable streams in various ways. We'll be talking here about a factor method operator called generate. The generate operator returns a cold, synchronous, and stateless generator of values. Cold essentially means that every time it's invoked, it'll start from the beginning, doesn't cache any values, for example. Synchronous means it's called in the calling thread, in the context of the calling thread, and stateless means it doesn't remember anything between calls. It's passed a parameter called generator, which is called back in a loop when a downstream observer subscribes. The callback that's invoked here from the generator should make calls to onNext, onError, or onComplete in order to signal a value or to signal a terminal event. A new observable instance is returned from the generate operator. The generate operator is only allowed to generate one event at a time, which supports a limited form of back pressure. Back pressure, as you may recall, is a mechanism that's provided to ensure that fast publishers don't overwhelm the computing and storage resources of slower subscribers. Here's an example we'll take a closer look at when we get into the case study at the end of this lesson. As you can see here, we pass in a lambda expression that's going to use the emit value passed in order to make onNext calls that will generate random, unreduced big fractions. So we'll talk about this when we get a little bit further along, but this will basically keep generating random, unreduced big fractions in perpetuity until the stream is terminated through some other means. In contrast, the observable create operator simply produces events whenever it wishes to do so. And as a consequence, it ignores back pressure, which means that a fast publisher may overwhelm the resources, both the memory resources and the computing resources of a slower subscriber. A classic example appears in a video you can watch at the bottom of the link at the bottom of the slide, where Lucy and her friend are getting chocolate too fast for them to deal with it. And so it's a pretty funny example of what happens if you don't have back pressure enabled. Project Reactor has a generate operator in its Flux class that works very much the same way. In particular, this little code snippet here is also used to generate a stream of random, large, and unreduced big fractions. The main difference is the types that are passed in are slightly different. Instead of passing in an emitter, we pass in something called a synchronous sync. But otherwise, the basic ideas are very similar. Likewise, the generate method that's defined in Java Streams stream interface also works in much the same way. This example shown here, this code snippet also demonstrates how to use Java Streams generate in order to generate a stream of random, large, and unreduced big fractions. So that wraps up our coverage of factor method operators that are related to the RxJava Observable class.